And we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Lequier. I'm with the Bankstown Arts Center. Today, we're going to screen two films related to the current exhibition, A Week on the River, by Clare Britton. The two films one of the films focuses on the Cooks, the other focuses on the Darling River, relating to an exhibition that we had last year with Uncle Badger Bates. With me today is Katarina Fraga Matos. Sorry, Katarina. Katarina is with the Council Environment team. She is the Community and River Health Specialist Officer, if you will. So Katarina, I'll let you introduce this first video because it relates to the Cooks River catchment. Can you explain what it is and
sure.
How it came about?
Sure. Thank you, Jason. I'd like to begin any talk that we do about the river with acknowledging the traditional owners of what is called today the Cooks River, but for thousands of generations before that, it didn't have that name, and they are the Gadigal, the Wongal, and the Gamigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay our respects to their elders, past and present. And it's significant that last year marked 250 years since James Cook arrived in Botany Bay, not so far from the mouth of the Cooks River, and it marked a point in history where two very different people came into contact with one another. One people believing that country was theirs to rule and to conquer, and the other living in complete harmony with country. And fast forward 250 years, and here we are today, where I think we are beginning to understand the ways that we do need to live with country and incorporate that thinking into the way that we do and live. And that's one of the beautiful things about the video you're about to watch. I love it for two reasons. One, it's very clever filming. What you're about to see, it was filmed in just a small classroom at the Georges River Educational Environment Centre of a single model, but it's brought to life with some very clever filming and lighting. But the message it speaks is really important, and it highlights how everything we do, whether we're at home, whether we're at the park, in our place of work, in our school, our everyday actions can have a really big impact on the river. And it's a really important message to get across, because a survey of Australian knowledge in water a few years ago shows that most people understand that water is reused. There's a water cycle, but the understanding about how does rainwater enter our areas and get into our waterways, it's less understood. So with that, Jason, take it away.
It's known as the Cooks River, but long before Captain Cook landed on its shores, the river was a healthy waterway cared for by Aboriginal people. Today, not everything in the river is as beautiful as the life that it supports. Pollution is seen sitting on the surface or unseen lurking underneath the water. How does it all get there? Let's take a look at this miniature model of the Cooks. It begins near the river's upper reaches at the Yunibadu wetlands. See how it snakes through the suburbs until it meets the sea at Kamay. We're sprinkling pepper to represent litter and pouring food colouring to show other polluting liquids. Sometimes people litter directly into the river. At other times, rubbish that's not placed in the bin can find its way down to the water, whether it's left right next to the river or many streets away. Did you know that when it rains, loose rubbish on the ground gets picked up and carried away by the water? Down the street it rushes before being pushed into the nearest drain. Travelling underground through pipes, the litter flows straight into the Cooks River. But rubbish isn't the only kind of pollution that gets washed away in the river with the rain. Can you think of some others? Loose dirt from construction sites. oil leaks on the street. Washing your car on the concrete. Even leaves from the trees. Fertilizers on grass. The rain clouds have passed and the impact on the river is clear. Can you imagine what the river might have looked like more than 250 years ago? Crystal clear water surrounded by lush green areas, plants, trees and bushland as far as the eye can see. In natural environment areas, when it rains, the water is absorbed by plants and the soil. In most cities today, everywhere you look, there are hard surfaces. The streets we drive on, the footpaths we walk on, the homes we live in. Rain that falls here finds nowhere to soak in and travels to the river down drains, taking all the pollution it finds along the way with it. This is one of the biggest challenges facing the Cooks River. It simply can't cope with the polluted rainwater that flows in from the many suburbs around it. Have you seen the Cooks River after heavy rain? There are lots of great things we can do to help reduce the amount of polluted rainwater entering the Cooks. Rainwater tanks are one way of capturing water as a precious resource that can be reused for watering gardens, washing the car or flushing the toilet. Rain gardens in streets soak up rainwater and filter out pollutants. More plants in your backyard can help too. Even car parks can be redesigned with soft surfaces to allow the water to soak into the ground. Retaining barriers around construction sites are very important to trap loose sediment and rubbish. All along the river, different pollution traps stop all kinds of litter. You can help the river too by putting your rubbish in the bin. What else can you do in your home or school to help the river? Together we can help our much-loved Cooks River become healthier.
So my first question, that was amazing, would be to you, Katerina. How was that model created, and where does that thing live?
Yeah, so that's a brilliant resource that is owned by the Cooks River Alliance, which is an alliance of councils and Sydney Water that are working together to work on the river as a whole. So all these stakeholders have a part and they all manage their little bit of the river, but through the alliance they work on whole of river actions. And it was a model that was created several years ago very painstakingly by an expert model maker who surveyed the area, who went around, explored the catchment, and really what you see, he did a brilliant job of picking up on areas of the river and replicating those in that model form. Some people do when you go and we would share it at community events, and they go, oh, where is my house or where is my street? And obviously it's not to scale, but it does have, they ask that question because they can see so many elements that look true to life.
Yeah, I feel like I could see my house, actually. I live on Riverside Crescent. So, yeah. And so I guess the next question is, for a river that runs through, the majority of the river runs through our council area, Canterbury Bankstown, but it also runs through Inner West Council and Bayside. How does how do you manage something that goes through different government areas? Like ecosystems don't stick to LGAs. How is that managed?
Right. So many, it does cover so many council areas. So in addition to the ones you've mentioned, also Strathfield, Burwood, Georges River Council, City of Sydney. Like you say, it's a big area. So that's why it is really important to work together. And it's not just local councils. There is Sydney Water is involved. There are areas of the river that are state responsibility as well. So what the Alliance is working on at the moment in partnership with many stakeholders is what's called the coastal management program. And it's being termed as a plan for the whole river, a plan for the whole Cooks River that does take into consideration that the whole of river. So, but very significantly, as part of that program, it's thinking about what needs to be done on our streets, what kind of planning needs to happen, not just along the river, but in the streets away from it, because as we saw in the video, that's what's got the biggest impact. It's what's happening in the streets surrounding the river, where the water is flowing from our suburbs and then reaching into our waterways. How can we collect more water in our suburbs, in our homes, in our public spaces to protect the river and to conserve water, because that's what brings in all the pollution.
And if people within this council or any of the councils that are touch the Cooks River goes through want to know specific ways that they can do that, where do they go for that information?
So on the Cooks River Alliance page, there's a page dedicated to the coastal management program that explains the various kind of studies that are being undertaken, the various kind of actions that are looking to be implemented, and the way that people can be a part of that. One of the ways that you can be a part of it is to join a local Cooks River community group. The Cooks River is very unique in the sense that it's got a very big group of several passionate community groups really making a change. There's bush care volunteer groups, like there are council bush care volunteer groups as well. There's cleanup groups. There's cleanup groups on land, cleanup groups in the river. People go kayaking and paddling as well, and taking out rubbish while they're paddling. So lots of different ways to help out. There's people that bird watchers that go out and survey how many birds are in the catchment. That's all really useful information. And I think the more that people connect to the river, and we've seen it in COVID, people rushing to appreciate these green spaces that we have nearby. I think that's plays a really important part in driving the need and the urge for more attention on it and restoration.
Agreed. And hopefully we can take some of the lessons learned from this most recent lockdown, which seems to be ending soon. And though we can go further afield, we'll remember the lessons that we learned if we spent a little bit of time along the Cooks, and maybe there's a newfound sense of stewardship of the river. Let's hope. I'll put the information in the in some of the comments below that you've mentioned. Thank you, Katerina. I'd like to go now. So we've got about 15 minutes. We can go a little bit further afield. Katerina, you're welcome to stay and watch. To another river, the Darling River. Before it was known as the Darling River, it was known for a long, long time by the Barkangee as the Baaka River. We have worked with in the past a Barkangee elder named Badger Bates, Uncle Badger Bates. Many people will be familiar with his work. Actually, he's from Wilcannia, but Broken Hill is the technical sister city for the city of Canterbury Bankstown. So we have an interesting relationship with Broken Hill. A few years back, we brought Uncle Badger to the Art Centre to do a mural, or to do a sculpture in the courtyard, which is a beautiful display of the Barkangee relationship with that river, and his totem, which is wedge-tailed eagle. I highly recommend, if anyone gets a chance, when the Art Centre opens soon, to come to the courtyard and check out that beautiful sculpture. But last year we worked with Uncle Badger Bates on an exhibition called The River is Our Past, Present and Future. It was filmed at a time when Uncle Badger was, well, the darling, the Baaka, was in the midst of I guess the last elements of the drought. This is quite dry. So Uncle Badger describes what it was like in the lead up to when the rains came, but particularly how Menindee lakes had dried up through mismanagement, water mismanagement, and drought. So this video that we're about to watch, The River is Our Past, Present, and Future, is part of that exhibition from last year. So enjoy.
We take our moiety, our Sparkany people, from Gilper and Muckle, that's the Eagle and Crow, and we take our meat, who is from our mother. So me, I'm a Muckra person, so I take my moiety from the eagle, so I'm a red-tailed eagle. With the black shag old Nutticha, we don't harm him, we'll only get him if we're really hungry. Or Paulie to the pelican, and there's another little bird what they call pinker. With them three birds, they're special. For the Baaka, the black shag will tell us where the fish are, and the pelican will do the same thing. And Pinko eat the river worm. There's a little worm, it's only about this long, little red sort of worm like a tiger worm, and it's native for the river. And Pinko will tell you where the worm is. So you go and you lift the logs up, the bits of sticks was laying around, and bits of stone, and you'll find worms for fishing. But when you do that, you leave a couple of worms for Binko. You chuck a couple out because he'll be watching you all the time, so you feed him too. And this is the Baaka, the Darling River, the Baaka. Where I was reared up, I don't like sitting inside of a building and doing my artwork, because I get no inspiration out of it. But sitting out here, now and again you might hear a bird whistle, you might hear an old crow come past and sing out or something, old wacko. I'm carving a crane. He'll have a yab in his mouth, walking around the weeds looking for yabbies. With this wood here, I didn't cut this tree. This was cut where they cut the big old river red gum down to make sleepers for the railway and for gardens. And what I do, I just go along and pick the wood up and shape it into what I want. I see something and I'll just draw it out, cut it and shape it to what I want to do, work with the wood. I like carving dead wood because with my carving, I'm bringing it back to life. Just in my mind, I bring it back to life in a different form. I carve birds and that because we're part of the environment. It's just natural. I got to talk for the animals what can't talk. I got to talk for the black shag, and I got to talk for this mussel because it can't talk. Everything need to live because everything, whether it's the smallest insect to the mussel, that's a part of the food chain. I think that everyone should take some sort of animal and say, this is my totem, this is who I'm going to be. It doesn't matter if you're black or white. You say, this is my totem, and this is who I'm going to respect, and this is who I'm going to fight for. Yeah, this old swan, black swans, old Yungulis. They fly in north to meet the water coming down. Yeah, this one's called Life Coming Back to Moon Lake, Lake Waitukani, Wilcannia. And this one was done after the first big millennium drought, and again when the water was filling, the lake was filling up. And this is sort of good happy times, and this is what happens when we get a flood and water in our rivers and in the lake system. All the swans and that come out, the fish come out into the lakes to spawn, and the swans come out and the other water birds lay their eggs, and it's just abundant and that. And just the darling lilies, and they don't grow in the lakes. They're not like the water lilies up the top end, and in the Northern Territory these ones grow out in the flat, and after a big rain they'll come up, but also after a big flood goes through and the lilies will come up. So we do need water on the floodplains and we do need water in the lakes. It's because the black swan and the pelicans and the little Goolay'yari, they got to have still water because they got to float in the nest and see how this one's swimming up and she's moving stuff around for her nest, for the eggs, see? And that one the same, coming back, swimming back just to check her eggs, and they'll go again. The name of the print is Baaka, the Forgotten River, and the Desecration of the Menindee Lakes. This Baaka here before that fish killed back in 2019. This the river, and this the Menindee Lakes and all the fishing that was dead. And the animals died, the emus and kangaroos and that. And there was a little bit of water at the Menindee in the weir pool, and this the lakes. I done the print just before the fish kill, when I started to really take water out of the lakes. When a yabby die or the fish, all the bones break up, so you got little bits of mussel, bits of yabbies and dead fish, see? And if I would have done it after these 3 cod, they would have been just skeletons too, but all the dead fish. And it's 3 generations of Granny Moisey's family, mine, my niece and my other little younger niece. And so that's how all our handprints. And why the handprint is in the lake, that means stop, enough. You destroyed our country enough. You're destroying our culture enough. You're destroying the environment enough. Stop and look and see the damage what you are doing. Because of what's happening to the environment, I am changing, and I don't know, it's hard for me to explain, but my personality is changing, my artwork's changing, and I just hope that one day my artwork will get the point across, and plus other Aboriginal people, not only just Aboriginal people, but white people, black people, our artwork got to tell the story of what's happening.
That's an amazing short film there by Uncle Badger Bates. It was filmed largely in 2018, 2020, when they were still in drought or just coming out of drought. It'd be fascinating to catch up with Uncle Badger soon and see how things are going out there at the moment. Obviously, they're dealing with different challenges at the moment with COVID, but Uncle Badger is doing okay. He and his family are safe, and hopefully we'll get to check in with them later. Katarina, we did forget to touch on the origin of that model and how it came about. I thought maybe we could come back to that. How did you? I guess maybe why is there a need for a model of a river catchment?
Sure. So the model was developed to be able to visualize and really explain how does rainwater, there's a tendency to call it stormwater, but that really hides what it is. It's rainwater. Rainwater is precious. When you start talking about it as stormwater, it almost changes the value. So what the model does as well is there's little miniature drains along those streets. And so, kids or adults, you can just pour little bits of water into the drains on the model and you then see it coming out into the river. So just being able to see that visually or do that physically is a really big learning, a great learning tool. And I should have mentioned that the video was actually produced as part of a learning education package, and it was one of the few things we could thank COVID for. We don't thank COVID, but we were planning to have an in-person education program last year, and then COVID struck, and we thought, oh, how can we still continue this program, still get these messages out? And the video was one of the ways that we were still able to continue to work on this program during that lockdown period. And something that I really love to see in this film, in the Uncle Badger film, was to see that beautiful image of what is a living and what is an alive river, and to see it, he depicted it so well with full of life, full of water, full of animal life. And that's something, it just reminded me of something that the Cooks River Alliance is working on at the moment. Historically, water quality in the river has been measured very traditionally in terms of what's the pH levels of the water, what are the macro and microorganisms doing in the water? Are there big communities? Are there small communities? And now we're shifting our thinking to that's still important measures, but there's a whole lot of other ways that we can measure what does river health look like in an urban environment. It's the amount of wildlife there is, like Uncle Badger was raising. How many birds can you see? It's also how many trees are alongside the river, how many trees are in our suburbs, and then also how many people are interacting with the river, because that tells us a picture of river health as well, if people are being drawn to it. So, yeah, watch this space for that report card that's going to be coming out with that information in the coming months.
Can't wait. Thank you. We'll link all of these things together. So if you're a loyal Arts Centre fan, then we'll cross collaborate and we'll post these things. I really like in particular what you said, and it touches on what Uncle Badger said about people being along the river as well, because we have a tendency, I think, particularly in the city, a tendency to consider ourselves outside of that ecosystem and separate from it. And sometimes it's well intentioned. It seems like we need to look after the river for the birds or for the mullets or whatever. But we don't actually consider ourselves a part of that ecosystem. Whereas, contrast that with Uncle Badger talking about how the river was changing him. His relationship to the river is so interwoven with his being, not just his personality, but like it's in his part of who he is as a Barkangee elder, and having like that's on the opposite end of the spectrum, almost having that such a rich, deep connection to the river, and to see ourselves as part of this catchment, as part of this river. I think we could all probably benefit from that.
Agree, absolutely.
Thank you, Kat. So this is all part of the ongoing exhibition, Week on the River, which features artwork, beautiful artwork by Clare Britton. So if you haven't yet explored the online exhibition, please do. There's a really cool map that you can explore and click through and go from the origin of the Cooks in Yagoona, a humble origin in Graff Park, to Botany Bay. It's really worth having a look at that. There's a scavenger hunt that you can do with the kids. If you're not close to the river, if we open up on Monday, you'll be able to go and visit, hopefully. And also, please join us next week for a screening of Rivers and Tides in the next installment of the series. Rivers and Tides is a film about the artist Andy Goldsworthy, who is an English, I think he describes himself as a landscape sculptor. It says Andy Goldsworthy's art is supposed to fall apart. It creates large-scale outdoor sculptures. He creates large-scale outdoor sculptures and artworks out of natural materials like mud, wood, ice, and stone. He'll spend months at a time on an installation built on a river or on the beach, only to have it washed away by a tide. So it's this very temporary, place-based and river-based artwork. Stick around for that. We'll be here next Wednesday at 12:30. So if you're working from home, take a lunch break, go from the bad screen to the good screen, and watch a movie with us. Thank you so much, Katerina, for joining us today and explaining the Cooks River catchment and why it's important.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing those other films. Sounds great.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.